The morning shift at Edwards Air Force Base had started like any other Tuesday in the Nevada desert. Sergeant Maria Rodriguez settled into her chair at the primary radar console, steam rising from her coffee mug as she watched the familiar sweep of green light paint empty sky across her screen. The control tower hummed with quiet conversation about weekend barbecues and upcoming leave requests, the kind of routine chatter that filled the spaces between radio transmissions. Rodriguez had been monitoring the restricted airspace for 3 years now, watching the same patterns day after day. Military training flights followed predictable corridors. Commercial aircraft stayed well clear of the no-fly zones, and the occasional lost Cessna pilot got quickly redirected with stern warnings. It was steady work that rarely surprised anyone. That changed at exactly 10:47 in the morning when a contact appeared from nowhere on her screen. "What the hell?" Rodriguez muttered, her fingers dancing across the keyboard to isolate the mysterious blip. The aircraft had materialized in the middle of no-fly zone 9, cruising steady at 29,000 feet with no transponder code, no flight plan, and no radio contact. It shouldn't have been possible for anything to get that deep into restricted airspace without triggering multiple alarms. "Hey, Captain Williams," she called to her supervisor, who was reviewing morning briefing reports at a nearby desk. "I've got an unauthorized contact in Zone 9. No identification, no clearance, nothing in the system." Captain Williams, a veteran controller with 20 years of experience managing some of the most sensitive airspace in America, walked over with the measured pace of someone who had seen enough emergencies to know when to rush and when to stay. Calm, he studied the screen for a moment, his weathered face creasing into a frown. How did they get past the outer perimeter sensors without triggering alerts? He asked, reaching for the secure phone that connected directly to scramble operations. "I don't know, sir." The contact just appeared, like it had been invisible until now. Williams felt an uncomfortable knot forming in his stomach. In 2 decades of air traffic control, he had never seen anything penetrate that deeply into classified airspace without triggering every alarm system they had. The desert base protected some of the most sensitive military operations in the country, and unauthorized. Aircraft were met with immediate and overwhelming response. "Get me Raptor flight on standby," he ordered, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had guided countless intercepts through dangerous situations. "Full scramble, weapons hot, and patch me through to NOR, a D command. They need to know about this immediately." Within minutes, the distinctive roar of twin-piston engines split the crystal-clear desert air as 2 interceptors climbed hard on afterburners, their white contrails painting brilliant lines against the cloudless, blue sky. Rodriguez watched her screen as the military aircraft closed distance with the intruder, her heart rate climbing with each passing second. "Unknown aircraft. This is Edwards Tower Control." Williams transmitted on the emergency frequency, his voice professional but edged with growing concern. "You are flying in restricted military airspace without authorization. Identify yourself immediately and divert to heading 270, or you will be intercepted by armed aircraft." Static answered back, nothing else. The mysterious aircraft held its course north by northwest, steady as a rock in calm air, showing no acknowledgement of the repeated warnings. Whoever was flying that machine knew exactly where they were going and had no intention of changing course for anyone. "Raptor 1, this is Control," Williams transmitted to the lead interceptor. "Visual contact in approximately 30 seconds. Rules of engagement are weapons tight until further notice. Unknown aircraft is non-responsive to all radio contact." "Copy that, Control." "Raptor 1 has visual on target aircraft." The pilot's voice crackled through the radio with the calm precision of someone trained to handle the most dangerous situations in the sky. "Configuration appears to be military. Hardware, angular profile, definitely not civilian construction. But there are no visible markings, no tail numbers, no squadron insignia, nothing to identify nationality or unit designation. Williams felt the knot in his stomach tighten. Unmarked military aircraft in restricted airspace meant either a serious security breach or something far more complicated than a simple navigation error. He had seen enough classified operations to know that some missions operated under rules that ordinary controllers never learned about. Raptor 2 here, the wingman reported. Aircraft configuration looks experimental, some kind of prototype. Design I've never encountered in field manuals or briefing materials. Whoever built this thing, it's not standard military procurement. Copy that, Raptor Flight. Unknown aircraft has less than 5 minutes to comply before we escalate to Washington. The lead pilot adjusted his oxygen mask and keyed his radio. Transmission, delivering the final warning with the authority earned through countless combat missions over hostile territory. His voice carried the weight of military enforcement behind every word. Unknown aircraft, this is United States Air Force Raptor 1. Turn that aircraft around immediately, or we will force you down. This is your final warning before we take defensive action. The words echoed through the silent cockpit of the mystery aircraft, where a woman sat with hands perfectly steady on the controls, breathing calm and measured despite 2 armed interceptors flanking her position. She wore no visible rank insignia, no name tag, no unit identification of any kind. No panic registered in her movements, no change of heading, no acknowledgement of the direct threats being broadcast at her aircraft. She flew as if the entire military apparatus surrounding her was simply background noise, irrelevant to whatever mission had brought her into the heart of America's most restricted airspace. The F-16 pilots had intercepted dozens of aircraft over their combined careers. From confused civilian pilots to foreign military aircraft testing American response times. But they had never encountered someone who simply ignored direct military orders with such complete indifference. The woman in the cockpit 30 feet away might as well have been alone in the sky, for all the attention she paid to their presence. Control, she's not responding to anything we're transmitting, Raptor 1 reported, frustration creeping into his professional composure. No radio contact, no course change, no defensive maneuvers. It's like we're invisible to her. Copy that. Raptor Flight. Maintain escort position while we run identification protocols through all available databases. In the control tower, Captain Williams activated every identification system at his disposal, running the aircraft's profile through military recognition databases, checking for any classified programs that might explain the mysterious visitor. The results came back negative across the board. No matching aircraft in any official registry, no experimental programs that fit the profile, no test flights scheduled through the restricted zone. But deep down, everyone monitoring the developing situation felt the same unsettling question, gnawing at them. Who flies through the most restricted airspace in America like they have every right to be there? Rodriguez watched her radar screen with growing unease as the 3 aircraft continued north, the mystery plane maintaining perfect course and speed while its military escorts struggled to understand their mission. She had guided hundreds of intercepts, but something about this situation felt fundamentally different from anything in her training. Captain, she said quietly, what if she does have authorization? What if this is some kind of black project we're not cleared to know about? Williams considered the possibility, but quickly dismissed it. He held security clearances that covered most special operations, and any legitimate military flight would have proper identification codes. The complete absence of any identification suggested either a serious security breach or something far worse. If she had legitimate authorization, she would have responded to our first contact, he replied. no classified operation would risk triggering a full intercept scenario without proper communication protocols. The secure phone on his desk rang with the distinctive tone reserved for priority communications from NORAD command. Williams answered immediately, knowing that the mysterious aircraft had now attracted attention from the highest levels of military intelligence. Edwards Control, this is General Thompson's office at NORAD. We've been monitoring your situation. What's the current status of the unknown aircraft? Aircraft remains non-responsive to all communication attempts, General. 2 F-16s are maintaining escort position. No hostile actions observed, but the aircraft shows no intention of complying with diversion orders. Copy that. We're running the profile through every database we have access to, including classified experimental programs. Stand by for further instructions. The line went dead, leaving Williams with more questions than answers. In the intelligence community, when senior officers started making personal phone calls about routine intercepts, it usually meant the situation was anything but routine. Meanwhile, 300 miles away at NORAD Cheyenne Mountain Complex, intelligence analysts huddled around classified terminals, dissecting every available detail about the mysterious aircraft. The underground facility hummed with constant background noise from massive air filtration systems and computer cooling fans. But the analysts worked in tense silence as they searched for answers. Aircraft profile doesn't match anything in our experimental programs database, reported the lead analyst, a woman with 30 years of experience identifying foreign military hardware. Configuration suggests advanced stealth technology, possibly more sophisticated than anything in current production. Her colleague, a grizzled intelligence veteran who had spent decades buried in the mountain analyzing threats to national security, shook his head slowly. Either we're looking at foreign military technology that somehow penetrated American airspace undetected, or this is a domestic program classified above our security clearance level. They cross-referenced the aircraft's flight path against recent satellite intelligence, looking for any clues about its origin or destination. The analysis revealed that the mysterious plane had approached American airspace from the south, following a route that avoided all known radar installations and military patrol areas. Professional evasion tactics, the lead analyst observed. Whoever planned this flight knew exactly how to avoid detection until they wanted to be seen. Or until they didn't care about being seen anymore, her colleague added grimly. Back at Edwards, the tension in the control tower continued mounting as the aircraft approached another checkpoint in restricted airspace. Military protocols required escalation to lethal force authorization if the intruder crossed the next vector boundary without proper identification. Williams prepared to make the call that would trigger presidential-level airspace violation protocols, his hand hovering over the secure communication links that would notify Pentagon leadership and ultimately the White House Situation Room within minutes. Every second brought them closer to a decision nobody in the room wanted to make. Shooting down unidentified aircraft over American soil carried consequences that rippled through careers, congressional hearings, and international relations. But allowing unauthorized penetration of the most sensitive military airspace in the country carried even worse implications. The mystery woman continued flying north with absolute confidence, as if she knew something that everyone else had yet to discover. Just as Williams reached for the red override button that would initiate lethal force authorization, an incoming transmission pinged through their secure network. The format was unusual, though, not their standard digital encryption string. Instead of being routed through normal military communication channels, the message arrived via satellite fax relay, using technology from the previous decade that was completely unhackable but incredibly slow. "What the hell is this?" Williams muttered, squinting at his secondary monitor as the document resolved slowly, line by line, as if materializing from another era. Rodriguez leaned over his shoulder to watch the grainy, pixelated image taking shape on the screen. The transmission quality was poor, but the content was becoming unmistakably clear. Official letterhead appeared first, followed by dense paragraphs of military authorization language that both controllers recognized from classified operations briefings. Level Omega clearance, Rodriguez read aloud, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. Tactical override authority valid for all military operations. Below the formal authorization text, written in firm, unmistakable script, was a signature that made Williams feel like the ground had shifted beneath his feet. A 4-star general signature, complete with official seal impression, authorizing the mysterious aircraft to proceed through any restricted airspace without interference. The call sign listed on the authorization form matched their mystery. Aircraft exactly, letter for letter, number for number. Hold everything, Williams announced to the control room, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had just realized they were dealing with forces operating far beyond their security. Clearance level. Raptor flight. Stand down, intercept immediately. We're receiving override authorization right now. Static crackled through the radio as the F-16 pilots processed this impossible development, their training struggling to accommodate something that had never appeared in any manual or briefing. Control, what do you mean stand down? We're locked on target, weapons hot, ready to enforce compliance as ordered. Authorization just came through, Raptor flight. The aircraft is officially cleared to proceed through restricted airspace under highest possible military authority. Cleared by who? We didn't copy any prior notifications through normal command channels. The control tower went silent for a long, uncomfortable moment. Williams stared at the signature on his screen, recognizing the name but struggling to understand how it could possibly be authentic. When he finally responded, his voice carried the weight of someone who had just discovered they were playing a game whose rules they didn't understand. By General Marcus Braxton, he said quietly. And that's a signature we don't question under any circumstances. In the background, analysts scrambled to verify the document's authenticity through every available database. Digital forensics, handwriting analysis, paper composition testing, watermark verification, everything checked out perfectly. But the signature belonged to someone who hadn't authorized anything operational in over 7 years. General Marcus Braxton had been one of the most decorated and respected commanders in modern military history, a 4-star general who had served on the Joint Chiefs of Staff and overseen some of the most sensitive operations during his career. But after brutal Senate hearings about black operations funding, he had disappeared completely from public service, refusing all consulting offers, declining interview requests, and turning down lucrative book deals. Most people in the intelligence community assumed he had died quietly somewhere remote, choosing obscurity over the spotlight that followed controversial military leaders into retirement. How is this even possible? Someone whispered from across the control room. The mystery aircraft continued north, now officially under the protection of the highest possible military authority. The F-16s maintained loose escort formation, no longer interceptors but inadvertent honor guard for a mission they couldn't begin to understand. Rodriguez ran additional verification checks on the authorization, cross-referencing the document against archived samples of Braxton's signature in classified databases. Every test confirmed authenticity, but the implications raised questions that none of them were cleared to investigate. Captain, if General Braxton has been out of active service for 7 years, how does he still have authorization authority for current operations? Williams studied the document more carefully, noting details that suggested this wasn't a recently issued authorization. The paper showed signs of age. The formatting matched older military document standards, and the security seals used authentication. methods that have been updated multiple times since Braxton's retirement. This authorization might be older than we think, he realized. Look at the date format and security protocols. This could have been issued years ago for an operation that never officially ended. The possibility sent chills through everyone in the control room. Somewhere in the shadowy world of black operations, a mission might have been running continuously for years, completely unknown to current command structure and congressional oversight committees. Control, are we cleared to return to base? Raptor 1 asked, his voice reflecting the confusion that everyone felt about the unprecedented situation. Negative, Raptor Flight. Maintain escort until further notice. And pilots, whatever you've witnessed today stays classified at the highest levels. No mission reports, no debriefings, no casual conversations with anyone about this operation. The pilots acknowledged with professional understanding, but privately wondered how you forget watching someone rewrite the fundamental rules of military engagement with nothing more than a piece of paper. The woman in the mystery aircraft continued, flying north with the same serene confidence she had maintained throughout the entire intercept, as if she had known all along that the right signature would appear at precisely the right moment. 3 hours after the intercept, deep within NORA Cheyenne Mountain Complex, senior intelligence analysts worked frantically to piece together the puzzle of the mysterious authorization. The underground facility's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across faces that had witnessed too many impossible situations over the years to dismiss anything as mere coincidence. Signature analysis confirms complete authenticity, reported Jessica Martinez, the lead handwriting analyst, adjusting her thick glasses as she studied detailed comparison charts. It's definitely General Marcus Braxton, but according to our comprehensive records, he hasn't signed any operational documents in over 7 years. Her colleague, Robert Collins, a grizzled intelligence veteran with 3 decades buried in the mountain, shook his head slowly. Braxton went completely dark after those Senate hearings about unauthorized black operations funding. The congressional investigation destroyed several careers and exposed operational methods that should have stayed classified forever. They had been cross-referencing the pilot's call sign against archived mission databases, running exhaustive searches through multiple layers of classification that few people ever accessed. What they discovered made the entire analysis team fall into stunned silence. The authorization matched operational records for a pilot officially listed as missing in action from a black operation designation Ember flight. But that mission file was sealed far beyond their security clearance level. Even the most basic operational details were heavily redacted, showing only approximate dates, general geographic locations, and final personnel status. Missing in action, presumed dead. This doesn't make any sense, whispered David Park, a junior analyst who specialized in tracking discontinued operations. The Ember flight operation was compromised 18 months ago. Intelligence reports suggested all personnel were either captured or killed by hostile forces in mountainous terrain overseas. Collins pulled up classified satellite imagery from that time period, studying grainy photos of remote mountain terrain in disputed territory. Official after-action reports concluded the entire team was overrun at their designated extraction point. No survivors recovered, no bodies found. Case closed. And yet somehow, one of those officially dead operatives was currently flying through American airspace under direct authorization from a general who had supposedly vanished completely from active military service. Why would Braxton surface now after all these years of complete silence? Martinez asked, studying the authorization document for any additional clues. What possible situation could be worth breaking 7 years of self-imposed exile from military operations? No immediate answers emerged from their extensive databases, but attached to the bottom of the fax transmission, They discovered an additional handwritten note in the same firm script that had authorized the flight. I authorized her original deployment 18 months ago. That authorization never expired. She's completing her assigned mission. The room fell into contemplative silence as everyone processed the implications. Somewhere in the shadowy world of black operations, a mission had been running continuously for 18 months, completely unknown to current command structure and congressional oversight committees. "Should we notify Pentagon leadership immediately?" asked Park nervously, clearly uncomfortable with the level of classification they were encountering. The senior officer present, Colonel Patricia Hayes, who had survived 3 decades of the most classified operations in American intelligence, considered the question carefully before responding. "Braxton outranks everyone currently in this room, even in retirement. His security clearance was never officially revoked, and his operational authority was granted by presidential directive. If he says she's authorized, then she's legally authorized, under protocols that supersede normal chain of command." "But what about normal oversight procedures?" Park pressed. "Congressional committees, budget accountability, operational reporting requirements?" "The chain of command includes operational levels you don't know exist," Hayes interrupted sharply. "Sometimes the most critically classified operations are the ones that never officially end, never appear in budget reports, never get congressional oversight because they operate under authorities granted during national emergencies." They returned to their computer terminals, but the fundamental questions remained completely unanswered. Who was the mysterious woman flying north with such absolute confidence? What was Ember Flight's true strategic objective that required 18 months of complete operational silence? And why had General Braxton chosen this specific moment to resurface from years of self-imposed exile? Meanwhile, back at Edwards Air Force Base, Captain Williams continued monitoring the situation with growing unease. The F-16 escorts had reported that the mystery aircraft was approaching the northern boundary of their patrol area, heading toward airspace controlled by a different military installation. "Raptor Flight, what's your fuel status?" he asked, knowing that the interceptors would need to return to base soon. "Control, we're approaching bingo fuel. Request permission to hand off escort duties to the next sector." "Copy that, Raptor Flight. You're cleared to return to base. Thanks for your professionalism in handling an unusual situation." As the F-16s peeled away and headed south toward Edwards, Williams watched the mystery aircraft continue north. On his radar screen, now flying alone through airspace that few people were cleared to enter. Whatever her final destination, she was getting closer to it with each passing minute. The only absolute certainty was that normal military protocols had been suspended by forces operating far beyond their understanding or authority in the intelligence community. There was an unwritten rule that everyone learned eventually. When signatures appeared from people who shouldn't exist, authorizing missions that officially never happened, you didn't ask dangerous questions. You simply ensured the authorization got processed correctly and hoped you never learned what was really happening in the shadows. The mystery aircraft touched down quietly at a remote airfield 30 miles west of any official military installation, a place that existed on no public maps and appeared in no flight directories. The landing strip was nothing more than cracked asphalt surrounded by empty desert stretching endlessly toward distant purple mountains, shimmering in the afternoon heat. One old SUV idled alone on the weathered tarmac, its engine the only sound, breaking the profound silence of the high desert. Heat waves rose from the asphalt, distorting the horizon into wavering mirages that made the entire scene feel like something from another world. A man stepped out slowly from the driver's side, white-haired and deeply weathered, moving with the careful dignity of someone whose body had endured decades of military service in harsh conditions. He wore no uniform and displayed no visible rank, but carried himself with the unmistakable authority that comes from commanding life and death. Decisions in the most dangerous places on Earth. This was General Marcus Braxton, though he looked nothing like the polished military officer who had once sat in Pentagon briefing rooms and testified before Senate committees. 7 years of self-imposed exile had carved deep lines around his eyes and left his hands permanently stained by desert sun and hard work. The woman climbed down from the aircraft cockpit with fluid movements that spoke of countless hours in military aircraft. She walked toward him without hesitation, her flight suit bearing no identification patches, no name tape, no unit insignia, but her confident posture suggested someone completely comfortable with command decisions and their inevitable consequences. They didn't salute when they met in the middle of the empty tarmac. This wasn't a formal military encounter between officers of different ranks, but something far more personal and complex. Braxton nodded once, a gesture between equals who had shared experiences beyond normal human understanding. "Rachel," he said simply, his voice carrying the weight of 18 months of worry and uncertainty. "General," she replied, though both of them knew that titles felt meaningless after everything that had happened. He handed her a second envelope, unmarked and sealed with old-fashioned red wax that bore the impression of a seal she recognized. Immediately, the authorization that had gotten her through restricted airspace had been just the beginning. This envelope contained the final phase of a mission that had cost more than anyone should have been asked to pay. She examined it briefly, running her fingers over the familiar seal, then tucked it inside her flight jacket without comment or questions. Their entire interaction lasted less than 2 minutes, but volumes of information passed between them in looks and gestures that spoke of shared history and mutual respect forged in the crucible of impossible decisions. "The extraction point was compromised," she said finally, the first acknowledgement of the 18 months that had passed since anyone had seen her alive. "I know," Braxton replied. "We lost contact with the entire team. Official reports concluded everyone was killed or captured." "Everyone was killed or captured," she confirmed quietly. "Except me." The weight of those words settled between them like a physical presence. Rachel Davis had been the intelligence officer for Ember Flight, a deep reconnaissance mission into territory so sensitive that it couldn't officially exist. When the operation was blown and the extraction went wrong, she had been the only survivor, left to complete the mission alone while the rest of her team died around her. For 18 months, she had lived in the shadows of a foreign country, gathering intelligence that would never appear in official reports, funded by accounts that didn't exist, supported by networks that had no names. She had become a ghost in the most literal sense, officially dead but still carrying out orders that came from the highest levels of American intelligence. "The intelligence you gathered," Braxton said. "Is it worth what it cost?" Rachel considered the question for a long moment, weighing the lives of good soldiers against information that could prevent conflicts that would cost thousands more lives. It was the kind of calculation that military officers made in their darkest moments, trading certain death against possible salvation. "It's worth it," she said finally. "But that doesn't make it easier to carry." Braxton understood. He had made similar calculations throughout his career, authorizing operations that required good people to make impossible sacrifices for the greater good. The Senate hearings that had ended his career had focused on the financial costs of black operations. But the real price was always measured in the lives of operators who disappeared into hostile territory and never came home. "The final phase?" he asked, indicating the sealed envelope. "One last delivery," she replied. "Then it's finished." They both knew that finished was a relative term in the intelligence world. Rachel would never be able to return to normal military service, never be able to use her real name or settle in one place for long. The kind of deep cover operation she had been running for 18 months left permanent scars that never fully healed. "There's a pension account," Braxton said. "Enough to disappear properly when this is over." She nodded, understanding that. This was his way of acknowledging the sacrifice she had made. In the official records, Rachel Davis was dead, killed in action during a classified operation. The woman standing on the desert tarmac was someone else entirely, someone who existed only as long as the mission required her to exist. "Thank you, General," she said, and this time the title carried all the respect and gratitude of a soldier who had been asked to give everything and had done so without question. Without another word, she returned to her aircraft and began the pre-flight check that would take her to the final destination of a mission that had begun 18 months earlier in a briefing room that officially didn't exist. Braxton watched motionlessly until the aircraft disappeared completely into the northern sky, then climbed back into his SUV and drove away across the empty desert. The meeting had lasted less than 10 minutes, but it represented the culmination of one of the most classified operations in American intelligence history. Within hours, tire tracks in the sand would be erased by wind, and no evidence would remain that the encounter had ever taken place. Rachel's aircraft climbed steadily through the evening sky, heading toward coordinates that appeared on no official flight plans but had been burned into her memory 18 months earlier during the final briefing before Ember Flight deployed. Overseas, the sealed envelope in her flight jacket contained intelligence that 3 presidents and countless intelligence officials had never seen, gathered at a cost measured in the lives of her entire team. The information had taken 18 months to acquire, validate, and verify through sources that existed in the deepest shadows of international espionage. Nuclear weapons programs, terrorist financing networks, and state-sponsored assassination. Plots that could destabilize entire regions if they became operational. The kind of intelligence that prevented wars by making them unnecessary. As she flew north through the darkening sky, Rachel allowed herself to remember the faces of the soldiers who had died to make this moment possible. Lieutenant Kevin Thompson, the communications specialist who had held the perimeter while she escaped the compromised extraction point. Sergeant Lisa Martinez, the medic who had stayed behind to treat wounded civilians caught in the crossfire. Captain James Wilson, the team leader who had given his life to ensure the mission could continue. They had all known the risks when they volunteered for Ember Flight. Special operations attracted soldiers who understood that some missions required ultimate sacrifice, and that success was often measured not in personal survival, but in objectives accomplished. But understanding risk intellectually and living with the guilt of being the sole survivor were completely different experiences. The aircraft's navigation system chimed softly, indicating that she was approaching the final waypoint. Below, the lights of a major city spread across the landscape like a constellation fallen to Earth. But her destination was a small airfield. On the outskirts, where another unmarked vehicle waited in the darkness. This time, however, the person waiting wasn't a retired general conducting an unofficial meeting in the desert. The man who stepped out of the black sedan wore an expensive suit and the unmistakable bearing of someone accustomed to wielding power at the highest levels of government. Even in the dim light of the airfield, Rachel recognized him from classified briefings and secure video conferences. Deputy Director Harrison Cole of the Central Intelligence Agency, one of only 5 people in the American government who knew that Ember Flight had never officially ended. He walked toward her aircraft with the measured pace of someone who had spent decades managing operations that couldn't be acknowledged publicly. "Agent Davis," he said as she climbed down from the cockpit, using her real name for the first time. "In 18 months, welcome home." The words carried more weight than a simple greeting. For a year and a half, she had been a ghost operating without backup or support, sustained only by the knowledge that her mission served a purpose greater than her own survival. Being acknowledged, being called by her real name, represented a kind of resurrection from the dead. She handed him the sealed envelope without ceremony, but both of them understood the significance of the moment. Inside that envelope was intelligence that would reshape American foreign policy for the next decade, preventing conflicts that would have cost thousands of lives and trillions of dollars in military expenditure. The intelligence is verified through multiple independent sources. She reported with the professional precision that had made her one of the most effective deep cover operatives in CIA history. Nuclear facility locations, funding mechanisms, operational timelines, key personnel. Everything necessary to neutralize the threats through diplomatic channels. Cole nodded, understanding that the information would be briefed to the president within hours and would likely trigger a series of classified diplomatic initiatives that would never appear in news reports. The most successful intelligence operations were the ones that prevented crises rather than responding to them. Your team, he said quietly, acknowledging the soldiers who had died to make this intelligence possible. They completed their mission, Rachel replied, though the words couldn't diminish the weight of 18 months of survivor's guilt. So did you, Cole said firmly. This intelligence will save more lives than we lost gathering it. That has to count for something. They both knew that moral calculations in the intelligence world were never simple or clean. Good people died to prevent worse tragedies, and the operators who survived carried the weight of those decisions for the rest of their lives. It was the price of serving in the shadows, where victory was measured in wars that never happened and conflicts that were resolved before they began. What happens now? Rachel asked, though she already knew the answer. Officially, Agent Davis died in the line of duty 18 months ago, Cole replied. Unofficially, you've earned a debt that this country can never fully repay. There's a new identity waiting for you, a pension that will ensure you never want for anything, and the gratitude of people who will never know your name. It was the traditional ending for deep cover operatives whose missions required them to disappear from official existence. Rachel Davis would remain dead in all records, while the woman who had carried out one of the most successful intelligence operations in American history would vanish into a carefully constructed new life. The aircraft? She asked, indicating the experimental stealth plane that had carried her through restricted airspace without detection. Will be returned to the program that doesn't officially exist, Cole replied with a slight smile, along with all records of today's flight. Within an hour, Rachel had transferred to Cole's sedan and disappeared into the night, carrying nothing but the clothes she wore and the knowledge that her mission was finally complete. The aircraft was loaded onto a specialized transport and taken to a facility where it would be disassembled and returned to whatever black project had created it. By morning, no evidence would remain that any of it had ever happened. 1 week after the mysterious aircraft incident, Pentagon investigators attempted to conduct routine debriefings with the F-16 pilots who had scrambled to intercept the unknown contact. What they encountered was a wall of professional courtesy that revealed nothing useful while maintaining complete technical accuracy. Major David Chun, an experienced pilot with multiple combat deployments, sat across from the investigators in a sterile conference room at Edwards Air Force Base. His responses followed military protocol perfectly, while revealing absolutely nothing about the true nature of what he had witnessed. The aircraft was intercepted according to standard procedures, he reported matter-of-factly. Visual contact was established, standard warnings were issued, and the situation was resolved through proper command channels. What was unusual about the aircraft's configuration? Asked the lead investigator, a civilian contractor who specialized in analyzing security incidents. The aircraft configuration appeared to be military hardware, Chun replied, sticking to facts that were already documented in official reports. No visible markings or identification were observed during the intercept. His wingman, Captain Rebecca Johnson, provided equally professional but uninformative responses when questioned separately. Both pilots had clearly received instructions about what could and couldn't be discussed, and they followed those instructions with the precision that had made them elite military aviators. When pressed for additional details about the mysterious aircraft, Major Chun finally offered a carefully worded observation that ended the investigation permanently. There are aircraft you intercept because they're violating established airspace regulations, he said thoughtfully. And then there are aircraft you escort, even if you don't realize it at the time. Captain Johnson added her own perspective. When asked about the unusual authorization that had ended the intercept, some missions are classified far above our security clearance level, far above anything we're qualified to discuss with investigators. The official inquiry stalled there, permanently. Too many powerful signatures protected the incident from further scrutiny, and the investigators found themselves blocked at every attempt to gather additional information. Files were immediately classified at levels that put them beyond reach of routine oversight. Witnesses were quietly reassigned to different bases, and the entire event gradually faded into the category of incidents that officially never happened. But in the intelligence community, word of the mysterious flight spread through unofficial channels, among people who specialized in tracking operations that didn't appear in official records. Senior analysts who had worked with General Braxton during his active service compared notes about his sudden reappearance after 7 years of silence. Braxton never authorized anything unless lives were at stake, observed one retired CIA officer who had worked closely with the general during some of the most classified operations of the previous decade. If he broke his silence to authorize that flight, it was because something critically important was at stake. Others who had known Rachel Davis before her official death recognized details from the incident reports that suggested her involvement. A reputation as one of the most capable deep-cover operatives in American intelligence made her survival and successful completion of an 18-month solo mission less surprising to people who understood the level of training and preparation required for such operations. Davis was one of the few operatives who could have survived that long in hostile territory without support, noted a former handler who had worked with her on previous missions. If anyone could complete a mission after losing their entire team, it would be her. The intelligence gathered during Ember flight began producing results within weeks of its delivery to the highest levels of government. Diplomatic initiatives that appeared routine to outside observers were actually precision strikes against terrorist financing networks and weapons proliferation programs that had been operating in the shadows for years. Nuclear facilities that didn't officially exist were quietly shut down through international pressure. Financial networks that had funded extremist organizations found their accounts frozen by coordinated actions across multiple countries. Key personnel in state-sponsored assassination programs were arrested by their own governments after receiving carefully worded diplomatic communications that made it clear their activities were no longer secret. None of these successes appeared in news reports or congressional briefings. The most effective intelligence operations were the ones that prevented crises rather than responding to them. And Rachel's intelligence had provided the foundation for preventing conflicts that could have destabilized entire regions. Meanwhile, in a small mountain town in Colorado, a woman named Rebecca Collins settled into a quiet life that bore no resemblance to her previous existence as a deep-cover intelligence operative. She had dark hair instead of blonde, wore civilian clothes instead of military uniforms, and worked as a freelance technical writer instead of gathering intelligence in hostile territory. But sometimes, late at night when sleep wouldn't come, She would remember the faces of the soldiers who had died to make her mission possible. Lieutenant Thompson, who had held the perimeter while she escaped. Sergeant Martinez, who had stayed behind to treat wounded civilians. Captain Wilson, who had given his life to ensure the mission could continue. Their sacrifice had meaning now. The intelligence they had died to gather was preventing wars and saving lives in ways that would never be publicly acknowledged. It wasn't enough to ease the guilt completely, but it was enough to make the weight bearable. In quiet moments between assignments, Rebecca would wonder about the other operators who were still out there in the shadows, carrying out missions that couldn't be acknowledged, making sacrifices that would never be recognized. The intelligence community was filled with people whose greatest successes would never appear in official records, whose most important contributions to national security would remain classified long after they were gone. General Braxton had returned to his self-imposed exile in the Nevada desert, satisfied that his final authorization had served its purpose. He had never broken his silence about classified operations during 7 years of retirement, but he had been willing to do so one last time to ensure that Rachel's mission could be completed successfully. The mysterious aircraft that had caused such concern during its flight through restricted airspace had been disassembled and returned to whatever black project had created it. No official records remained of its brief appearance over the Nevada desert, and the technology it represented would continue developing in facilities that didn't appear on any public maps. Captain Williams continued his duties at Edwards Air Force Base, occasionally remembering the morning when an unauthorized aircraft had rewritten his understanding of how military authority really worked. He never learned the full story behind the incident, but he had gained a deeper appreciation for the complexity of operations that existed beyond normal command structures. The F-16 pilots who had scrambled to intercept the mystery aircraft found themselves unable to discuss the incident with anyone, but they carried with them a newfound respect for the operators who worked in the deepest shadows of national security. They had witnessed something that challenged their understanding of military protocol and authority, and the experience had left them with questions that would never be answered. 5 years after the incident, very few people remembered the morning when an unidentified aircraft had penetrated America's most restricted airspace and emerged with authorization from a general who officially didn't exist. The files remained classified at levels that put them beyond routine oversight, and the witnesses had moved on to other assignments where the extraordinary had become just another classified memory among many. But in the intelligence community, legends have a way of persisting even when official records disappear. Senior operators would occasionally share stories about missions that couldn't be acknowledged, about operators who had made impossible sacrifices for objectives that remained classified decades after their completion. The story of Ember Flight became one of those legends whispered among people who understood the true cost of national security. A deep cover operation that had officially failed but had actually succeeded beyond all expectations, carried out by an operator who had officially died but had actually completed one of the most successful intelligence missions in American history. Rebecca Collins, the woman who had once been Rachel Davis, continued her quiet life in Colorado, finding peace in the simple routines of civilian existence. She had learned to sleep through the night without nightmares, to enjoy conversations that didn't involve coded language or hidden meanings, to live without constantly watching for threats that might emerge from the shadows. But she never forgot the lesson that General Braxton had taught her during their brief meeting in the desert. Some missions require sacrifices that can never be fully acknowledged or repaid. The operators who accept those missions do so knowing that their greatest successes will remain secret. Their most important contributions will never be publicly recognized, and their sacrifices will be remembered only by the few people who understand what they have given up. The intelligence she had gathered during 18 months of deep cover operations continued producing results years after its initial delivery. Terrorist networks that had been dismantled, nuclear programs that had been shut down, assassination, plots that had been prevented, all because one operator had been willing to complete her mission, even after losing everything and everyone that had mattered to her. In a world where success is often measured by public recognition and official acknowledgement, the intelligence community operates according to different values. The most important victories are the ones that prevent tragedies from occurring. The most valuable operators are the ones who disappear completely when their missions are finished. And the greatest sacrifices are the ones that are never officially recognized. Rachel Davis had understood those values when she volunteered for Ember Flight, and she had lived by them during 18 months of isolation and danger. The woman who emerged from that experience was different in fundamental ways, shaped by losses that could never be fully healed and experiences that could never be shared with anyone outside the intelligence community. But she had also gained something that few people ever experience: the absolute certainty that her life had served a purpose greater than personal advancement or recognition. The intelligence she had gathered would continue protecting American interests and saving lives for years to come, and that knowledge was worth more than any medal or commendation that could have been awarded. General Braxton had made his own sacrifices to ensure that her mission could be completed successfully, breaking 7 years of silence to authorize her flight through restricted airspace had risked exposing operations that were still ongoing. But he had been willing to take that risk because he understood the value of what she had accomplished. In the end, the most powerful people are often the ones who exercise their authority in silence, making decisions that shape history without seeking credit or recognition. True power doesn't announce itself loudly or demand acknowledgement. It operates in the shadows, making the hard choices that others are unwilling or unable to make. The story of the mysterious aircraft that flew through restricted airspace with authorization from a dead general became a reminder that some operations exist beyond normal understanding, protected by people whose authority transcends conventional command structures and congressional oversight. For every mission that appears in official records, there are others that remain permanently classified, carried out by operators who accept that their greatest contributions will never be publicly acknowledged. Rebecca Collins understood the truth better than most people ever could. She had paid the price for that understanding with 18 months of her life and the loss of everyone she had served with. But she had also gained something invaluable: the knowledge that when it truly mattered, she had been willing to sacrifice everything for something greater than herself. In the quiet moments between her new life's ordinary responsibilities, she would sometimes remember flying through restricted airspace with absolute confidence, knowing that the right authorization would appear at precisely the right moment. It had been a perfect demonstration of how real power operates: silently, effectively, and without need for explanation or justification. The mystery aircraft had disappeared back into the classified world from which it had emerged, but the lesson it represented endured. In a democracy, the most important guardians are often the ones whose existence can never be officially acknowledged, whose sacrifices can never be publicly honored, and whose victories can never be celebrated in the light of day. They operate in the shadows not because they choose secrecy, but because the nature of their work requires it. They make sacrifices that others are unwilling to make, accept risks that others are unable to bear, and carry burdens that others are unprepared to shoulder. The woman who had once been Rachel Davis understood those truths with a clarity that came from living them. She had found peace not in recognition or reward, but in the quiet satisfaction of knowing that her mission had been completed successfully, and that the intelligence she had gathered would continue protecting people who would never know her name or understand what she had sacrificed for their safety. In the end, that was enough. Sometimes the greatest victories are the ones that remain forever silent, achieved by people who understand that true service requires the willingness to disappear completely when the mission is finished. The sky over Nevada remained clear and empty, showing no trace of the aircraft that had once challenged every assumption about military authority and operational security. But the legend endured among those who knew how to listen for stories that could never be officially told, reminding them that the most important guardians are often the ones who remain forever invisible. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and become a part of our Everyday Life Stories community. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment below. We love hearing from our amazing viewers around the world.